gotta find me. But Gotham's a big place, and there's a whole army between us. I'm ready for you.
Alfred, the militia have deployed a device. It's burrowed deep into the road.
Yes, I see it. Similar devices are being planted across the city.
I'll investigate. It's a bomb, Alfred. A well-armored one.
Oh dear. In that case, sir, should you really be standing quite so close?
I'm going to set up a remote link to the Bat computer and hit it with every virus we've got. Once we're hacked in, I can expose the core and defuse it with a controlled explosion.
Very good, sir. Though I should warn you that the militia has already deployed a platoon of its unmanned tanks to stop you.
They won't.
Sir, the virus upload has destabilized the device. If you move too far away and lose the connection, it will flatten everything within a 10-block radius.
Good morning, good evening, whatever time of day it is for you. Welcome to this thing that I do called Thor's Entertainment. I am Thor, and I am going to be piloting Batman through disposing of explosive devices this episode. That's right, we are doing the side mission campaign for Disarmament, otherwise known as the militia mission with all the bombs. This is the fourth and final militia mission, and at the very end, once everything is completed, we'll be fighting against Slade Wilson, otherwise known as Deathstroke. Now this may look familiar to you because this first milestone 4 campaign for Disarmament, well, we did that in the main City of Fear storyline. It's a requirement to progress. So yeah, seeing this first bomb get destroyed, it might give you a little bit of deja vu, but that's okay. Every other device that we dispose of throughout this episode is going to be one that was not featured in the main story, so it won't be entirely repeats. Previously, we finished the militia missions, Armored and Dangerous, Occupy Gotham, Own the Roads. In those missions, we took down roadblocks all around Gotham, we took down radars that were covering the sky, and we got rid of some armored vehicles with militia lieutenants in them.
You think that's it, Dark Knight? I've got this whole city wired to blow. Try and disarm the explosives, and you'll face even more of my drones. You see, I've waited years. No one is taking this from me. Look at a charred crater if they try.
Sir, that warning was broadcast publicly. I suspect the Arkham Knight wishes to discourage outside intervention.
So all that's left are these bombs that are set around the city as kind of a last resort measure to keep control, and also probably to be sore losers if they end up losing control. Well, let's not let that happen. Let's go ahead and get those taken out and pretty much remove all of the militia threats entirely.
I'm heading to the train yard to defuse the militia explosive.
Take care, sir. They're bound to scramble drones to your location as soon as they detect you disarming the device.
I mentioned it earlier, but the point of finishing this fourth and final militia mission is so that we go against Slade Wilson, otherwise known as Deathstroke. Now, if for some reason you're starting off with the very last video of all these militia missions, well, first off, why? But other than that, you may not know why exactly we're going against Deathstroke. Now, the reason for that is that after the Red Hood character, I keep doing that, after the Arkham Knight character was beaten by Batman, he kind of fled and retreated and was never to be seen again until the very end of the game, very briefly. Now, in his absence, the militia still needed a commander. And it turns out they had someone on standby to do just that. That person was Deathstroke. So he took control of the militia, we eventually took down Scarecrow, and even though Scarecrow and the Arkham Knight are no longer in the picture, he already accepted the money and took the contract, so he wants to make sure it is completed. And the requirement for this one to be considered completed is to kill Batman. And it's kind of funny in retrospect because he was not intended to be the militia commander, he was just on the side. And remember, Scarecrow and the Arkham Knight had their plans for Batman. They weren't necessarily going to kill him right away, they were going to unmask him and show the world who Batman was, and then the Arkham Knight was supposed to kill Batman. I find that interesting because Deathstroke, well, he wants revenge for what happened in Arkham Origins. So he was hired to kill Batman in the event that they failed. And for him to take this job, he must have really thought that they were going to fail. So it's just kind of funny to me that somewhere in a back room, Slade Wilson is just waiting for them to screw up so he can finally step up and kill Batman. He must have really thought they were incompetent. And then when they finally got taken down, he's just like, about damn time. So, campaign for Disarmament. It is going to be a longer video. I was going to say it's probably the second longest video out of all the side missions and the second longest out of the militia missions for sure. Now, the last time we had a video this long, I took a good amount of time to talk about Deathstroke in the New 52. And we got through the early portions of New 52 when he was first introduced in his solo series and got all the way through the point that he killed Lobo, and that first solo series kind of just came to an end.
Excellent work. Bomb defused.
You can't take out every bomb, Dark Knight. You don't know what it takes.
I mentioned in that same video, which I think was Occupy Gotham, that he eventually got another solo run towards the end of New 52. I didn't talk about that new run in that video because I wanted to save it when I had a little bit more time to talk about it. And considering this mission is going to take me, I'd say it's going to take me about 50-ish minutes. I'd say it's a very good time to go ahead and talk about the second run of solo comics for Deathstroke. So, how did they come to be? Or I guess more specifically, what happened when it kicked off again? Well, the writers did something a bit unorthodox and weird. Deathstroke ends up going against a very large amount of enemies, and he manages to kill them all, but at a great cost to himself. Like, he is severely wounded and barely alive. If I remember correctly, the entire back end of his skull has been shot off, and then his brain is exposed, and just, yeah. He's in pretty rough shape, and this definitely should have killed pretty much any normal human being. And he is just very slowly healing and barely getting through it. He eventually loses consciousness, but he does survive. And at that point, his body is found, he gets operated on, and whenever Slade Wilson wakes up again, DC did something that they did for a few different characters around this time, and they just de-aged him. Oh, and he also has 2 eyes again. So yeah, he either grew back 1 eye, or maybe they implanted an eye. I don't know. But the one thing that is made very, very clear is that the assassin that we have come to know, you know, the guy that's always had an eye patch, or his armored mask is covering one side of his face where one eye should be but isn't, you know, that iconic one-eyed mask. Yeah, suddenly he has 2 eyes again and is like in his 20s or something.
I'm going to enjoy rolling over their car, Batman, with you inside. It's Batman! He's got a... freaking tank!
I'm going to continue disarming the militia's explosives. There's one planted right next to the botanical gardens.
They'll throw everything they have at you, sir.
I'd be really interested to hear what exactly the reasoning was behind wanting to de-age Deathstroke to be back in like his 20s or something, younger than he's ever really been in the comics. Like, it's really hard for me to think of a good reason. Like, for no other reason than they just wanted to make new Deathstroke comics, and I guess it got really hard to justify how old he was and how he was not aging any further or not dying. So all of that character progression from the first line of comics in New 52 for Deathstroke, where he was facing the fact that he was getting older, eventually he was going to be a little bit outdated or going to be replaced as the world's greatest assassin, where he had to have an existential crisis of sorts whenever he was facing a world with, you know, superhumans, and he was just kind of on the lower end of being a superhuman assassin. Like, all of that character development, when he finally came to terms with everything, proved that he could still keep up in a world where all the threats are a lot bigger. Yeah, throw all that out the window. We're going to make him young now, so it doesn't matter, you know, that he was coming to terms with how old he was and how he was starting to fall apart. Nah, fuck that. We're just going to completely undo all of that hard work. So yeah, they de-aged him, and there's this new threat that's pestering him. I'm going to fast forward a lot here. We find out that that new threat, that is Deathstroke's resurrected father.
The bomb's payload is exposed. I can use the power winch to trigger a controlled explosion.
Congratulations, sir. Bomb destroyed.
Failure!
I'm going to disarm the malicious explosive in Kingston.
This is terribly trying on one's nerves, Master Bruce. Be careful.
I didn't comment on this too much in the last video, but Deathstroke's father was a complete piece of crap. And as a child, Slade Wilson was literally sold by his father to try paying off some debts that he owed to some gangsters or mobsters or whatever. So yeah, he literally sold his child for enough money to pay off his debts. And when Deathstroke got older, his father was bedridden and looks very, very ill and like he's barely alive and basically just being kept in this world by the wonders of life support. And Slade Wilson, rather than letting his father die, throws a good amount of money towards making sure he stays alive, because he does not want his father to have the luxury of death. He wants him to stay alive and suffer in his old age and stay in that bed and be miserable for as long as humanly possible. And he wants to rub it in that he was successful in comparison to his father, and that he will never be the man that he was, even though he kind of becomes similar to the man he was because of the horrible crap he does to his own kids, but hey, whatever. So yeah, he basically tortured his father by keeping him alive for as long as humanly possible, and eventually his father does in fact die. I don't know how he got resurrected, I don't know how he got superpowers all of a sudden, but the new solo run for Deathstroke gave him superpowers and made him a gigantic threat. Oh, and now he's also calling himself Odysseus. Why? I don't know. Wait, was it Odysseus or Ulysses? Odysseus or Ulysses? I don't know, who cares, it doesn't matter. He now has an amazing supervillain name.
The bomb's payload is exposed. I can use the power winch to trigger a controlled explosion.
Controlled explosion successful, sir. That bomb is no longer a threat.
It's a pity you're afraid to kill, Batman. You'd be good at it. Oh man, it's him!
I need to disarm the explosive planted beside the Bank of Gotham Kingston branch. They won't stop me.
As I was saying, Deathstroke's father is now resurrected and has an amazing supervillain name that is either Odysseus or Ulysses. One of the two, I can't quite remember. So what he wants to do is kill his son, Deathstroke, or, well, his son, Slade Wilson, and then take possession of Jericho, his grandson. In this scenario, Odysseus or Ulysses wants to utilize Jericho's amazing telepathic and telekinetic abilities for some nefarious deeds. And Rose Wilson, Jericho's sister, is just running interference and trying to protect her little brother. That means we get Jericho Wilson and Rose Wilson in the new 52 storyline for Deathstroke, finally. So in the Occupy Gotham video, I went to great details on how crappy of a parent he was for Grant Wilson. Now it's finally time to get into how crappy of a parent he was for Rose and Jericho. I guess I'll start with Rose Wilson since she's probably the most comparable to Grant Wilson, who I've already covered. Now, unlike Jericho and Grant, Rose is not the daughter of Adeline. After Slade Wilson and Adeline were no longer together, Slade Wilson went on a pretty interesting little rampage through Asia for a bit. And that's where he ends up meeting the mother of Rose, and I cannot remember offhand what her name is. One moment. Google. Lily Worth. Her mother is Lily Worth. Anyway, she ends up having Rose, and she knows that's Deathstroke's daughter, and she fears for Rose's safety if Deathstroke were to ever find out that he has a daughter, so she keeps her a secret from Deathstroke for most of her early life. It's not until she's a teenager that Deathstroke finds out that she exists, and if I remember correctly, Deathstroke isn't even the first one to figure it out. I mentioned that Rose and Grant have both held the title of Ravager before, but I forgot one other person. That other person that was Ravager was Slade Wilson's brother, Rose's uncle.
The bomb's payload is exposed. I can use the power winch to trigger a controlled explosion.
Good work, Master Bruce. Threat removed.
They're just drones, Dark Knight. When you face me, you'll have to cope with a manned machine.
I'm heading to Bristol to disarm one of the explosives. The militia's determined not to lose anymore.
All the more reason to take them, sir.
Now, he is not a big fan of his brother Slade. In fact, he goes on a bit of a rampage trying to kill what remaining family Slade has. So once he finds out about Rose, well, he does the exact same thing. Fortunately, Deathstroke is able to save his daughter, but it kind of just reinforces exactly what her mother believed, that her daughter would never be safe so long as Deathstroke knew about her and was involved in her life. So he goes ahead and puts her in the care of the Titans, the Teen Titans, however you want to refer to them, and then he just disappears for a bit. So eventually he decides that he wants an apprentice and decides it's time to look Rose up again. Considering he's already burned the bridges with his sons, his daughter is the only one he has left, so he goes and gets her from the Titans, and then he pretty much has his brother strung up, the guy who kidnapped her, of course. And he says, you know what, here's your chance for revenge, go ahead and kill him. She takes him up on it, and then she begins learning from her father. This goes about as well as it did for Grant, with good not being good enough, having plenty of abuse, and the expectation that Rose needed to be perfect, which she struggled to accomplish. Now, she was good, but being perfect is a pretty unrealistic expectation. So what does Slade do? Well, he injects her with the exact same serum that gave him his superhuman abilities, and then she gains a few of her own, like, I believe, precognition, kind of seeing briefly into the future kind of thing. Besides that, though, I believe her abilities are the exact same as her father's, overall increased physical abilities, and the ability to heal from wounds immediately. And, the serum also has the wonderful effect of driving her slightly insane at times. And sensing that her father was no longer approving of her and considering no longer allowing her to be his apprentice, she goes ahead and rips out her own eye just to show him how committed she is and to show him that she wants to emulate him. Despite all of this, similar to Grant, she eventually performed well enough that he approved, and she also attained the title of Ravager, taking it from her uncle, and, like I mentioned earlier, kind of bouncing back and forth between Ravager being Grant or Rose. Although I do feel like Rose is the more appropriate Ravager. I think she embodies the character a little bit better, and when you compare her abilities and her situation growing up to Slade, I think that she's a more appropriate successor to Deathstroke.
Marvelous work.
That's it. Work your way to me. You did some damage the first time we met. I'm looking forward to paying you back. Bye. Bye, Arkham.
There's an explosive deployed in Otisburg. I won't let them threaten this city.
So, yeah, psychologically, Rose was falling apart, and it did not get better for a very long time. And finally, whenever she did start to improve mentally, she separated herself from her father and kind of went off to do her own thing, and she's still pretty rocky with her dad as a result. So that's my really overly simplistic overview of Rose Wilson. So that just leaves Jericho, the one that Ulysses, Odysseus, whatever, is after to begin with. Now, Jericho is Joseph Wilson, and he has given himself the title of Jericho. Now, his abilities vary quite a bit just depending on what writer was handling him at the time, but his abilities are generally going to be some form of telepathy, telekinesis, and the ability to possess people. So, where did things go wrong with Jericho? Well, due to his father's assassin work, many people wanted Slade Wilson dead, and many people then went on to realize that an easier way of going about it than fighting a guy that's called the greatest assassin would be just to go after his family. And that's what one assassin ended up doing, and took his child hostage. And in the midst of this hostage situation, Jericho ended up getting his throat cut, losing the ability to speak, all because of his father's career choices. So yeah, he got kind of screwed over in a big way by his father's occupation. And then, if I remember correctly, he went on to help out with the Teen Titans being attacked by Deathstroke during the events of the Judas Contract, which is if you're not familiar with the Judas contract, it's when Deathstroke accepted a contract to kill the Teen Titans. So he was pretty instrumental in stopping his father there, disapproving of his actions, and eventually he went on to join the Teen Titans himself because they saw the potential in his abilities. Once they, got over the hurdle of him being an assassin's son, they welcomed him in, and it went alright for a little while. And then he got buddy-buddy with Raven, and since, Trigon is constantly trying to possess Raven, they then found an alternative in Jericho because of his human-possessing abilities. It left him susceptible to also being possessed by demons.
You used to be raw, Batman, all fists and fury. The man I fought didn't hide in his car. Back her up. The road's blocked. Let's go see the blown-up factory. Come on.
Alfred, there's an explosive located in Riker Heights.
They'll send reinforcements, sir. Good luck.
So yeah, they inhabited Jericho's body, and eventually they overwhelmed him, and he lost control of his own body and became a gigantic threat. And that threat only came to an end when fighting his own father, who tried to help. And in a moment when he had control over his own thoughts again, he asks his father to kill him, not seeing any other way out of it. And then Deathstroke is forced to kill his own son. Or at least that's what happened before New 52 when they rebooted everything. So you could see how historically Jericho has been continuously screwed over by his father's decisions and felt like he needed to intervene and be a better person. And yeah, now he's being hunted by his grandfather because this kid just can't catch a break. Anyway, that is my backstory on both Rose and Jericho, which then brings us back to what I was originally talking about, the second solo run of Deathstroke in the New 52 line of comics. Deathstroke was nearly killed by his old man, then he was de-aged, and then he found out that he wasn't even the main target, and that his father was actually looking for his grandson, Jericho. So Rose found out about all the nonsense and just decided to go find Jericho and protect him throughout all of it. And now Deathstroke is playing a game of catch-up and trying to figure out where his kids are and trying to stop his dad. So what ends up happening is he looks up an old ally, enemy, depending on how you will look at it. And that old ally or enemy, depending on how you're choosing to look at it, is Harley Quinn.
The militia will rue the loss of more, sir. That bomb, or such a large number of tanks.
I don't like drones, Batman. I like my hands on the wheel, finger on the trigger, my eye looking down the sights.
The militia have an explosive in Drescher. Time to defuse it.
They'll be fighting back hard to protect their bombs, sir.
Alright, now back to what I was saying. Deathstroke ends up teaming up with Harley Quinn. Now, this was during a time when Harley Quinn was kind of getting shoehorned into everything because her popularity was kind of skyrocketing. But at least here, there is a little bit of a decent reason for why these two are teaming up. There is a little bit of a past history because previously in New 52, they were both serving on the same Suicide Squad team. Although their time together ended very poorly, with the perception just being that Deathstroke betrayed the team and was turning on them to work with the Russian government. Now, Slade states that this is not the case and that the team was getting captured, so pretending to side with the Russians was the only way he could think of to save everybody on the team, but they didn't see it that way. They just felt like they got screwed over by someone who was supposed to be their teammate. Getting back to this story, with Jericho and Rose on the run, Deathstroke gets word that they're probably somewhere in Gotham, so he hits up one of the few people he has a working relationship with, and that would be Harley Quinn after their time in the Suicide Squad. So he calls her up because he needs a local to help him find his kids. Well, Harley Quinn pretends to be helping him out, but ultimately she sabotages him and just puts him in position to be found by Batman. This leads to a fight between Deathstroke and Batman, where Slade Wilson detonates bombs around a building and then drops it on the both of them. Now he manages to escape, and Batman also survives the blast. Both of them crawl out of the rubble on their own way and continue on their own path. Slade continues to look for his kids, and Batman begins to investigate, figure out what the hell is going on. Eventually, Slade makes his case to Harley Quinn that he is not a traitor and that the situation was far more complicated than they realized, and she puts aside their differences long enough for the two of them to work together and in fact find Rose and Jericho. Now, they find them just as Odysseus, Ulysses, whatever, finds them as well. This leads to a confrontation, and ultimately Slade is victorious, but only after he unmasks himself, and then Ulysses, Odysseus, whatever, sees a much younger man that he does not actually think is Slade. So the whole de-aging thing that he went through earlier ultimately saves his life and gives him a moment to strike, to which he uses to kill his father and save his kids. And yeah, that's how the first portion of Slade Wilson's new Deathstroke solo run comes to a close. He ends up saving his kids, which is great. Doesn't really change anything between him and his kids because they still think he's a piece of crap, but that's fine. He wasn't looking for any sort of retribution here. He just wanted to make sure his kids stayed alive. And let's see here. One of the other good storylines from that solo run at the end of New 52 is the God Slayer storyline. Now, in this story, Deathstroke is hired to kill a Greek Titan. So basically, whenever this Titan was defeated by the Greek gods long ago, it was encased in some sort of a statue for all of eternity, and that statue is being held on Themyscira, which is the island that Wonder Woman and the other Amazons live on. Slade ends up taking up this contract and making the trip all the way to Themyscira. He's allowed entry onto the island by the Greek god Hephaestus, who is I guess you would call him the blacksmith kind of god, where he creates weapons and things that are used by gods. An example of that would be the lightning bolts that Zeus throws around. Now, those lightning bolts are crafted by Hephaestus.
You think you're good? I once took out 60-80s with an RPG, 2 shells, and a punctured lung.
I'm going after an explosive in the north of Founders Island.
The militia will fight tooth and nail to keep hold of the remainder, sir.
Now, not only did he allow Slade entry onto Themyscira, but he also gives Slade Wilson some new weapons. He gives him what are considered the God Slayer swords. Weapons powerful enough to kill gods or titans. This is kind of a necessity because as good of an assassin as Slade is, him trying to kill something on a deity level is a bit of a stretch, but giving him weapons that are capable of killing gods even if he himself is a mortal, well, that does kind of level the playing field at least a little bit. So what is this contract about? They've already captured the Titan, so why kill him? I guess the simple answer to that would be fear. Hephaestus and some other interested parties are afraid of the day that this Titan possibly escapes and is unleashed upon the world again. Apparently beating him the first time around was kind of a little bit of luck. So rather than chance it again, they hire Deathstroke to enter Themyscira and destroy him while he's still imprisoned. Well, it turns out this contract is a little bit rigged, in that some parties want him to succeed, but others just want the Titan to be freed. So, what happens? Deathstroke enters Themyscira, locates the statue, and then is immediately interfered with by Wonder Woman. The two fights, but there is no victor here because before a decisive victory could be given to either one of them, the Titan manages to break free in the struggle. And then the worst case scenario has occurred. The Titan is freed, and now Deathstroke needs to team up with Wonder Woman to keep him from escaping Themyscira. Now this is a pretty big event that also draws in the attention of Superman, who mistakenly thinks that Deathstroke is the enemy here rather than a reluctant ally. So briefly these two fight against each other, and what would typically be a relatively easy victory for someone as strong as Superman, he actually ends up getting a little bit roughed up by Slade because of those Godslayer swords. He gets kind of knocked around, and it's not as one-sided of a fight as it would have normally been.
3 bombs remaining. I won't leave them operational.
You seem pretty attached to that car, Batman. A shame I have to wreck it. This is like Arkham City. We've got the whole damn place to ourselves.
There's an explosive in the Port Adams container yard. I can't leave it operational.
They won't make it easy for you, Master Bruce.
But similar to what happened when Slade fought Wonder Woman, there was no way to determine who would have won this fight with Superman. Neither one of them got the opportunity to deal a winning blow, and ultimately, before any sort of a decisive victory could occur, they realized that they needed to team up together in order to stop a much bigger threat. Now, with the 3 of them combined, being Slade, Wonder Woman, and Superman, they do eventually come out on top, and Slade does kill the Titan. Now, after all of that, the Greek gods are a little bit pissed, and they come down to confront the mortal who would release a Titan onto the world again. Now keep in mind that Deathstroke was able to slay the Titan, so despite him putting the world in danger, Superman and Wonder Woman do intend to let Slade go since he did help to defeat a major threat that was going to possibly destroy the world. Now the Greek gods feel a little bit differently about how Deathstroke should be handled following this encounter. They feel like Slade needs to pay a price for causing such a great risk to the world to be free. And I believe they start throwing around the idea of killing Slade. Now this pisses him off and he's like, look, I did you guys a favor. I did what you guys were unwilling to do. I killed the bastard. I made sure there was no chance he would ever be free again. I made sure that he would never enslave people or come back to kill you guys. You might want to blame me and say I put the world at risk, but at the end of the day, I got rid of a threat that you were unwilling to deal with. So, yeah, the gods begin to talk amongst themselves, and then they decide, yeah, we'll let you live, but we still have to punish you somehow. Have you got any suggestions? And then Deathstroke is just like, fuck it. Rips out his eye, throws it to the gods, and is like, just take this and leave me the hell alone. Of course, he spent most of his career with only one eye, so what does he care? He was doing just fine without it. And then the gods accept the offering, and then he goes back to being Deathstroke and just doing Deathstroke crap. Although he may have actually gotten to keep the eye, Hephaestus just stepped up and said, hey, you know, I kind of encouraged this just a little bit. I thought it might be a good idea. Maybe we don't screw him over for something that some of us really did want. But no, that conversation never did occur, and Hephaestus is a jackass. Now, I am skipping a bunch of small storylines, and I may circle back to them eventually, but really, they didn't amount to a whole lot, like Deathstroke teaming up with Harley Quinn to save his kids, and then the Godslayer story are probably 2 of the biggest storylines that occur throughout that solo run. The rest of it, I feel like, only lasts 1 or 2 issues. One of the last big storylines for that solo run was Deathstroke going after someone else who was trying to kill him from his past.
The bomb's payload is exposed. I can use the power winch to trigger a controlled explosion. 2 bombs left. No one holds Gotham hostage.
Well, no one gets away with it, sir.
I haven't seen a battle like that since the onslaught in Kurok. Takes me back.
The militia have deployed a device near Chinatown. They're throwing everything they have to keep the explosives operational. It won't help.
As I was saying, the final major event from the solo run for Deathstroke in New 52 saw him yet again being hunted down by someone from his past. That person being Wardell Chambers, otherwise known as the Lawman. Not an amazing name, but hey, that's alright. So, what is Wardell's beef with Slade Wilson? Well, way back when, the two were kind of a mercenary team, and he ended up getting captured by some enemy forces and tortured and just had a very bad time. And, well, instead of Slade going to free his friend, he left him, and, well, Wardell just had to suffer through that crap. And after he was eventually freed, it turns out he did not like the concept of being left for dead, and he started plotting some revenge. Now, the lawman has the ability to telepathically communicate with some people, to include kind of telepathically controlling them in some situations. So that sets us up for our plot. He ended up doing this little mind control thing to Rose Wilson, and yet again Slade is off to save one of his kids. It's kind of funny how frequently that seems to occur in his stories. So that may not sound like an amazing plot, and it's not, but what made it interesting was some of the run-ins with other characters that Slade has throughout all of it. One of the more notable ones was when he had to face off against Red Hood, who was hired to interfere with Slade's attempt to save his daughter. Turns out the person who hired Red Hood was, yet again, Wardell the lawman. Now, Red Hood didn't realize the full circumstances of the situation, otherwise he most likely would not have interfered and done what he did. Now, the fight goes pretty favorably for Red Hood prior to getting knocked out by some RPG fire. Once he becomes conscious again, him and Slade talk it out and realize that it was kind of a manipulated situation, and Red Hood, regretting kind of some of his actions in it, decides to team up with Deathstroke to go save Rose. Now, I could be completely wrong here, but I'm pretty sure this is the only time that Red Hood and Deathstroke have been on the same team as each other. Yeah, sure, in this video game you kind of sort of have it, but they are never on screen at the exact same time, so I'm going to go ahead and still call this a first.
One explosive device left to deal with. The militia's grip on Gotham is loosening.
To do one assassin's job. Remind me to hit a toy shop before we leave.
The militia have an explosive deployed down in the old waterway. The city's still under threat.
So they show up to take on Lawman, who is now being helped out by another character called Snakebite, and it is revealed that Rose Wilson is under mind control and will also be an adversary in this fight. In the end, Red Hood and Deathstroke are successful and they end up saving Rose. I guess I just like this one because of the Red Hood Deathstroke team up. They're two of my favorite characters in DC, so yeah, that made me pretty happy. And back to this video game, we are down to the very last bomb in the campaign for Disarmament. After this, we'll be going after Deathstroke himself. So I guess I'll go ahead and start a little speed round of just random Deathstroke accomplishments just to remind everybody that yes, this guy is a pretty big threat. I guess just to wrap up the New 52 a little bit, Slade Wilson has faced off against the Suicide Squad successfully, going against people like Black Manta and Deadshot. On occasion, he has helped out Lex Luthor, which caused him to have to fight a huge group of Bizarro Supermen. He ends up killing Copperhead whenever he's teaming up with Lex and the remainder of the villains in Forever Evil. He's been briefly a Yellow Lantern. Don't remember the details on that one too much, but it happened. He has killed Green Arrow, who was then resurrected due to Mr. Miracle's blood, but before that happened, he still killed Green Arrow. He's killed Atom. He ends up defeating the Flash in Rebirth, and whenever he beats the Flash, he temporarily taps into the Speed Force and has his speed powers. He went on to fight Superman again during Rebirth using some pretty amazing tech that was allowing him to survive hits from Superman, and this was all a part of a plan that was orchestrated by Amanda Waller to start looking for weaknesses against Superman. He's fought and defeated Damian Wayne, and that's just accounting for New 52 and a very small portion of Rebirth. That's not counting all the crap he was doing before they rebooted the entire DC universe in New 52. Back in the old days, DC had him doing all kinds of crazy shit. And hell, this is Batman Arkham Knight, a video game, so let's go ahead and compare him to another video game version of himself. And I'm thinking of Injustice. In the Injustice universe, he ends up taking on Shazam, the Flash, and Wonder Woman, and he defeats all of them. And on top of that, he ends up destroying the Watchtower, blowing it up. And if you don't know what the Watchtower is, It's basically the Justice League satellite base that orbits the Earth. So yeah, Deathstroke was especially on some crazy shit in that game. Oh, and I'm just going to go ahead and repeat it again, that Deathstroke has killed Lobo and also defeated a Greek Titan.
We lost
The bomb's payload is exposed. I can use the power winch to trigger a controlled explosion.
Well, Batman. Looks like you've been busy.
This occupation's over, Slade. You're done.
You think I care about the militia? About Gotham? I'm an assassin, Batman. And I came here tonight to do one thing.
Then do it. Grand Avenue, Slade. I'll be waiting.
So yeah, the world's greatest assassin is kind of ridiculous, especially whenever you consider he's not really a big superhuman. He just has a healing ability and, a little bit of tactical genius. So yeah, Slade Wilson's a pretty big badass.
Grand Avenue. I'm coming for you, Slade.
I imagine he's rather aggrieved at your success so far this evening. You'll have to be at your best to beat him.
Alfred, raise the bridges. He's not getting off this island.
Yes, sir, but please be cautious. Scans indicate that Deathstroke's tank has a 360-degree field of vision. He'll be impossible to catch unaware.
Do you know what every guy who's fought with me and walked away has in common, Batman? I got them next time.
So after everything that I have told you, after all of his accolades as an amazing combatant in the comics, and how he was arguably the very best boss fight in Arkham Origins, who would make you have to counter wave upon wave of attacks against him just to get the smallest window of opportunity? This great fighter should have been an amazing fight in this game as well. Should have. So you'll recall in previous videos I said that I had a bad feeling about this fight. It was not mentioned to me at all in any sort of an advertisement or by anyone else who had played the game.
Just a matter of time before I find you, Dark Knight.
So this instantly made me think to myself, the fight may either not be memorable or just be flat out bad. I hoped I was wrong, but here we are and you're already seeing it, so you may already see what my complaint is going to be. Rather than having a great fight against the world's greatest assassin, one of the best hand-to-hand and weapons-related combatants in all of DC, we are getting another damn tank battle. I just don't know what to say at this point. We have had hundreds of tank battles in this game. Way too many at this point. And yet, we're getting one more. And it's not like we're getting it against any sort of an enemy that specializes in vehicles or something like that. Some technological expert who can make the most out of the drones. No, we are getting the world's greatest assassin in a tank battle. The guy that's known for using swords, staffs, guns, fighting hand-to-hand. And now he's in a tank. And it might even be forgivable if there was some sort of a comic-related reason for this. But I can't think of a single time when Deathstroke was doing anything in relation to being inside of a tank. It seems so out of character and random for him, but it stops being random the moment you think about how this game has been designed. And you look at this fight and it should look familiar to you. Other than its location, this is basically a copy and paste of the Arkham Knight tank battle from earlier in the game. You're trying to avoid a bunch of Cobra tanks and pick them off one by one until the bigger Cobra tank is the only one that's left. The only difference between the Arkham Knight's bigger tank and Deathstroke's bigger tank is the fact that the Arkham Knight's tank could only be shot in one spot that would cause damage. In Deathstroke's case, you can shoot any part of the tank and it takes damage. Sure, it has that whole 360 view gimmick, but it's the same fucking fight. They just basically copy and pasted it. It's just so damn disappointing. To go from one of the best boss battles in a game to arguably the worst in another. And it just sucks because this is one of my favorite characters. That should be super obvious based on how much I've talked about the character throughout these 4 militia side missions. And you'll notice that I don't call them the Deathstroke side missions. I've been calling them the 4 militia side missions. And that's because, in all reality, these are not Deathstroke missions. Like, I don't feel like I've been going against the world's greatest assassin this entire time. It's just been a bunch of random militia people.
You're pushing your luck, Batman. There's only so much you've got left.
Even in this boss fight, it doesn't really feel like I'm going against Deathstroke. I'm just going against a random tank. But don't worry, I have more complaints to come. Let's just see how this tank battle shakes up, because, we worked very hard to get here, we may as well see how it ends.
Face me, Bat! Find a good place to hide. I'm coming.
Deathstroke is my first priority.
Flee the fight. Die with dishonor. I'll crush you next time, Dark Knight. You can't hide forever. It's over! Where are you? You cowardly bastard. You caught me off guard.
You shouldn't have dropped it.
If you were any kind of man, you'd pull the car over and finish this proper.
You had your chance. It's over.
I'll kill you, Batman.
Then you better hope someone puts up the bounty.
This ferryman doesn't need payment anymore. I'll deliver you for free.
That thing of flatness! Move! I'm going!
Move it, Slade.
You call this a prison?
You think it's wise to put me in here with all these lesser warriors? You might not have any prisoners left when you return.
Woo! Beauty is Pig's specialty. Pig can make you young again. Pig can soften the scars.
I knew a guy in Hanoi. Used to make wallets out of dead Viet Cong. You guys would hit it off.
Alright, let's just go ahead and rewind. I need to see that crap one more time. Alright, why not? You know what? We're just gonna run with that. We're gonna keep the glitched ending. Seeing Batman and Deathstroke hover through a building towards each other, and the whole impact between them happening inside the building where I can't see it due to the glitch pretty much sums up how I feel about this whole mission. It's just a mess. And anything good that could have happened, it just didn't, or you couldn't see it. Like I said, I had a bad feeling about this one, and that bad feeling unfortunately came true. It all came down to the fact that I had not heard anything about this, so I felt like it either wasn't going to be a memorable fight or it was going to be a bad fight. But I was really hoping that was not going to be the case. I was hoping I was wrong. After all, I had not heard that Professor Pig was in this game, and the Perfect Crime Side mission ended up being one of my favorites. So I was really hoping that Deathstroke was going to be another pleasant surprise, and it wasn't. These are the 4 militia side missions, and they just happen to have Slade in them, being kind of a shell of his former self. We beat the militia. We took out their radars on top of buildings. We took down their roadblocks. We took out their bombs, and we took out their armored vehicles. In the end, we went against Slade and his copy and paste Arkham Knight tank, and we ended up destroying that too. Then he jumps out of the tank with a sword at the Batmobile. He was going to attack the Batmobile with a sword. Okay. Oh, and then Batman does a Danny Phantom and goes ghost through a building to tackle Slade to the ground and hits him one time and beats him. We destroyed his tank, sure, but Slade himself did not take any damage prior to now. So he literally got beat with one punch. The guy that beat a Greek Titan and Lobo and Superman on occasions he has fought against. But no, a punch from Batman. One punch from Batman beat him. I'm done. I'm done. This isn't Two-Face. This isn't the Penguin. This is supposed to be the world's greatest assassin. Hell, even Professor Pig took more hits than Deathstroke did. Alright. Well, this is the end of the campaign for Disarmament mission and the end of the 4 militia side missions entirely. Again, we're just going to rattle it off. We managed to defeat the Occupy Gotham side mission with the radars on top of the roofs. We ended up defeating the Own the Road side mission where we took down all of the roadblocks. We ended up winning Armored and Dangerous when we defeated the 9 completely unnecessary armored vehicles driving around Gotham. And we just finished campaign for Disarmament where we destroyed all the bombs that were littered around Gotham City. And we have arrested Slade Wilson, otherwise known as Deathstroke. That just leaves one more side mission left. In the next episode, we are going to go against the Riddler and all of his crazy nonsense, and we're going to try and save Catwoman, who he is holding hostage. So that's going to be a fun one. I want to thank you all for watching. As much as I've complained about it, I hope you still enjoyed these videos, and I hope you enjoy the ones to come. Take care, and I will see you all next time.